Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to Luncheon with the Experts at Carcinoid Cancer Foundation, brought to you by Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. My name is Rain Bennett. And if you don't know me, some of you are familiar with my face by now, but I'm a filmmaker. I've been working with CCF for almost 10 years now to create video content, to spread awareness and raise education about neuroendocrine tumors and neuroendocrine cancer. And we do that through video series, live Facebook series like this one, and more in-depth video series that you can see here on Facebook or our Carcinoid Cancer Foundation YouTube channel. So this series, the Luncheon with the Experts, is made possible by our support from Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. So we just have to say thanks to them always, because without this, it wouldn't happen. And a brief word before we get too deep in today's episode, a bit of a disclaimer. We just want to say that the opinions expressed by our guest presenters, as well as the questions asked by the audience, you all at home, haven't been created or suggested ahead of time by the sponsors of the Facebook Live program. And the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation doesn't endorse or promote any of the views, opinions, or information in the presentation. Audience members should not rely, and this is the main takeaway, audience members should not rely solely on the opinions or information expressed by our guests, and should seek guidance and direction from their own medical advisors regarding any choices they make about their health and treatment. So all that means is we're going to give you some information. We're going to talk about our guest's specialty and talk about neuroendocrine cancer and tumors. And we know now that we need a collective group to approach this disease, but by all means, do not neglect your hometown team, right? Your doctor, your team that you've been working with. This is something that they know your case and they need to be a part of. So we want to help you, but just take the information we give you today and bring it back to your home team. So today we're really excited. I'm really excited. Our guest is Catherine Bouvier, goes by Kathy, who is the CEO and co-founder of Neuroendocrine Cancer UK. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yeah, that's right.
So tell us a little bit about, and we're going to have plenty of time to dive deep into your story and how you serve the community, but just give us the elevator pitch of where you find yourself in this community, who you hope to serve, how you hope to serve them.
Well, I mean, I started a long time ago, I guess about 21 years ago, back at the Royal Free Hospital in London at the neuroendocrine tumour unit there. So I was a specialist nurse, and then moved into Neuroendocrine Cancer UK, which was originally called Net Patient Foundation. And then got involved with the international community, and got to know the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation, wonderful Grace. So thank you very much to them for the invitation, and got to know the rest of that community, a huge, passionate, driven, fantastic community, who we really are all trying to do the same thing, just trying to support patients, drive them, advocate for them, empower them, give them the right information, direct them to the right healthcare teams, and just really support what can be, I'd say, a little bit of a difficult pathway for some people.
For sure. And this is something that I specifically want to talk to you a lot about today, because it is a difficult journey, and a lot of people aren't sure where it leads. And so that's our goal here at CCF. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about our conversation that we're going to have today. So for those at home, I see many of us already know the drill, and you're telling us where you're signing on from in the world, and you're saying hello, and we love that. That's what we want to see. We love to see how far how far these reach. And we know that our guest today is from the UK, so we're already international already. But all of these reach all over the world, and one of the best things is the messages we get afterwards, and how we actually really help people and their journeys from all over the world. And that's really exciting for us. And so Luncheon with the Experts is a deeper dive. It's not so topic based. It's more of a deeper dive into the members of our community, in this neuroendocrine cancer community, what makes them tick, how they try to serve the people that they serve, which we already talked about. So there's nothing off limits. Like, ask your questions, and Kathy has agreed to try to get to most of them if we can today. But yeah, send them in, and we're going to field those questions, and we'll be talking to Kathy for about an hour. If we don't get to your questions, because often we have a lot, I just encourage you to follow up with CCF, and you can message them here on the Facebook page where you are, or you can send them a message at carcinoid.org. And just know that before we get going, that this is evergreen, this video, meaning it will live here permanently on the CCF Facebook page. You just go to the videos tab. And then also for those of us in the community who don't have Facebook, we repurpose this and we broadcast it starting Monday on YouTube as well. So you can always find that there. Now, before we get started, one last thing. We know how challenging it can be to be a NET patient and be in this journey that we're talking about, especially seeking diagnosis, especially during this time of the pandemic where we are all struggling to find our way forward at times. So we just want you to know rather that CCF is here for you whenever you need us, and we love providing these sorts of programs to give you value. And if you would like to show your support in return, an easy way that you can do that is to text the word experts, EXPERTS, to the number 1-914-380-7323. Again, that's texting experts to 914-380-7323. And we will put that in the comments, and anything that Kathy references today, any links or resources or books or anything that would help you, we have people on the back end. Shout out to Grace and Michaela, who will add those links into the comments and try to respond to you. And by the way, speaking of which, a special shout out, I was talking with Grace, CCF today, and she told me today is Friendship Day. And I just thought that was a perfect moment for this discussion, right? It's perfect. And I just wanted to say that, this neuroendocrine cancer community that I feel privileged to be a part of now, they are a group of friends, and they're almost more than that. It's almost a family. And we have one of our videos that we've put out recently where I think it was Dr. Wolin who talked a lot about the community and just how strong this community is. And I talk about it every week, and I will continue to talk about it every week because I haven't really seen that before. I've done a lot of medical filmmaking in the health space. And that's something that as a storyteller, I really like. And I get the feeling that Kathy does too when we've briefly talked. So I just wanted to say happy Friendship Day to all our friends out there, all the friends of Luncheon with the Experts. So Kathy, I want to dive a little bit deeper into your origin story, we'll call it, right? Like what got you started? I know you were a nurse for a long time, right?
Yeah.
So tell me the things that you were seeing that led you to where you are now and how you could help patients. My question is, what was the problem that you saw that needed help to be solved? What was the gap that you were trying to fill when you made that transition?
I think there's a simple word for me, which is what I saw, which I found really upsetting, was a sense of isolation that I felt very much in a UK community where we didn't have all the centres of excellence we have now. We didn't have that community. We had pockets of healthcare, and you're very much blinkered when you're in your hospital and you're in your environment. And it was only when we got calls into the hospital from people around the UK that I realised that there was such a disparity of information. There was a lot of, as I said, feelings of isolation, of anxiety. There were people who were just simply being given the wrong information, being sent home with most horrific news of only having a couple of months to live. And I was thinking, that can't be right. That doesn't feel right. That's not what we're saying to our patient community. And that was really the driving force with trying to set up a support group, I guess, originally called the Net Patient Foundation. And I did that with a couple of fantastic people. One guy called Andy Geach, who was my fiance, and another one, Kathy Kalamis, who was actually a medical writer herself. Mm-hmm. And they both actually had neuroendocrine cancer. So we forged forward trying to get some money to kind of build a website and just try and put the right information out there. That's all I could kind of do. I was working full time as a nurse in our, had our own patient caseload. So that was just kind of a thing that we thought we would do, and that would be the right thing to do to provide just some right information. But the response we got when we set up that website was overwhelming. Just hundreds of people contacting, going, "Oh my God,
people were wanting that."
Yeah, absolutely. And then, we were hoping that some of the patient community could then drive that forward. But the two main drivers, obviously my fiance and Kathy, unfortunately both died, quite almost the same period of time, I would say, within 12 months of each other.
Mm.
So it was kind of left and no one was really doing anything with it. So I thought, okay, let me see if I can do something in the community to try and, I think, we talk about going into the community when we work in a hospital area, but I was thinking, of building a community. Let's build a network. Let's try and make this better for everybody and improve some of this isolation and this anxiety. And that's really where it all started.
This word, isolation is it really sticks with me. And I do a lot of work in different pillars of health and happiness. I like to call it financial health, physical health, mental health. And what I've learned is that they're all overlapping and interconnected, right?
Yeah,
And so, yeah, this thought of isolation, when someone feels that way, when they feel alone, what does that do to them when they also are combating this new journey of a confusing topic and a rare cancer and this thing that they're facing? What does that feeling of being isolated cause?
I think it causes a multitude of things. And I think, the fact that you mention it's not just about the sense of isolation in itself, but being diagnosed with something that sounds really weird. It's not a word that it's not the easiest thing to raise awareness of. And we know that in the whole community, everyone wants to call it something else, but it is neuroendocrine and that's what it is. And even some of the treatments and the investigations are all, weird names. They're not the usual common kind of chemotherapies sometimes, or the pathways that you would refer to in cancer. So you don't know where to go, you panic, you have anxiety, you look up the wrong stuff, you sometimes just go down paths that are desperate paths as opposed to paths that are based on evidence and support. And obviously we wanted to try and, or we want to, and we need to continue to do that. This hasn't gone away completely, to push people down the right path, obviously led by themselves and their family members and their loved ones, but the right path for them, not a path that's just sort of a dead end or a blind jump in, if you like, just because they're not quite sure where else to go. But I think it has devastating effects to feel like you're on your own. I think it's just the most awful feeling, and I don't want anyone to feel like that.
This is what I like. One of the reasons. So I've been a filmmaker for a long time and a writer for a shorter time than that. But now I help outside of doing work like this and creating videos. I help people understand the power of storytelling and how to utilize that. And one of the things that is so powerful about storytelling is when you share your stories, it lets people, it allows people to see a roadmap forward if they are feeling isolated. First of all, there's that connectivity that happens when you share a story. Oh, their story sounds like my story. Now I feel like I'm not so alone. But then secondly, it shows if they've navigated that journey, it shows you a way forward, and that gives you hope. And that, as you know, is everything. So that's something I want to encourage anybody out there. And I see it within the net community, like people share their stories, and I can't emphasize and reiterate how important that is from my experience. Kathy, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I say, I mean, you're so completely right. And we've developed this more and more over the years. We've got this program called Faces of NC UK, which is all about people sharing their experience. And they could be healthcare professionals or patients or family members, but they've all been affected or work within the community. And also we have these NATA support groups. And, through this difficult period of lockdown and everything, it's been amazing to be able to keep those running virtually. But that provides just so much support for people. It's outstanding sometimes when you can see somebody coming along for the first time, obviously very frightened, obviously very unsure, maybe slightly shy and a bit kind of, oh God, what the hell's this? What's this group of people, random people? But then leaving, feeling kind of a sense, I think I've made some friends and I've got some answers, and I feel hopeful about this. I feel like I know what I need to do. And if nothing else, I think that's so important. Having a path, right?
Absolutely. And hope is such a big part of it. And it's not just fluff. It's not, people obviously need information. And that's the two-sided thing that we try to accomplish here is give them information, but also like hope is such a big part of it. I mean, of feeling that. So everybody who's joining us today, and if you know someone else that would benefit from this, feel free to go ahead and share this video. Let them know it's happening right now. I see you all saying hello. First of all, I see a lot of people from North Carolina, Cherryville, Willow Spring. Shout out to my North Carolinians who are coming in droves. Winston-Salem. I am in Durham, North Carolina. So hello to you. And also we are already reaching some places in South America. So a great reach, but we've been talking briefly today. Today, we're going to talk about patient advocacy, among other things, right? Hope, the community, all of these things that Kathy also tries to, it is part of her mission, right? To strengthen this community. I want to encourage you all to, ask any questions that you have about the patient experience, about anything. Kathy's here and she's been working in this field for a long time. But since we just talked about it, I also want to encourage you all to share your stories. It doesn't even have to be a question. And if you're out there, your comment can just be like, here's something I experienced. And I think I mentioned this on the last episode last week. One of the things I love, and this is apropos of what we were just talking about in regards to the community, is to see as I'm scrolling through the comments section, seeing people watching the Facebook Lives commenting to each other and sharing their experience. And if someone asks a question that either I get to or I haven't gotten to, someone else will chime in and say, hey, so-and-so, here's who I talked to and here's what I learned. And you see the community at work in our comments. And that, I don't want to get too cheesy, but I love that sort of thing. So yes, send in your questions, but also send in your experiences. Please let us know. I got to shout out Nikki, who just says there's a fabulous quote from Brene Brown. And I just have to say, Brene Brown is a hero of mine. And if you aren't familiar with her work, it's very powerful. It's a lot about shame and vulnerability, right? And speaking to that feeling of isolation that we talked about. And Nikki says, there's a fabulous quote that Brene says, one day you will tell your story of how you overcame what you went through, and it will be someone else's survival guide. I'm like getting chills right now just thinking about that.
Yeah.
That's the enormous power of the shared experience. That's it. She's a genius. I love Brene Brown so much. If you haven't read her stuff, I encourage you to. Still trying to connect to others in NC. Jennifer, we've got some people here, so reach out to them. Thank you for this from Brian. We are new to NETS here in Louisiana. Wife was recently diagnosed. Sorry to hear that, Brian, but please know there is a community here. Kathy, you had mentioned something, you had mentioned first kind of starting this as a support group. And this is something that we talk about in our videos and content at CCF a lot, the importance of a support group and why one should start one, why one should seek one out. So can we talk a little bit about the benefits of a support group, and also for these people like Brian, who his wife was just diagnosed, who are feeling that feeling we've been talking about. They're at the beginning of their journey. They feel isolated. They feel scared. Let's talk about that, the potential next step of seeking out a support group. Obviously, you have to, find your doctor and your specialist and your medical team. But in this other thing that we're talking about, and we talk a lot about the quality of life of a NET patient, what is the advantage? What is the benefit of a support group?
I think the first thing I need to say is that support groups aren't for everybody.
Okay, fair point.
I think that's just really a really important thing to
let's unpack that a little bit.
Some people find them very uncomfortable, just not their kind of thing at all. They find that the support of family and friends is far enough. And so that's all really okay. So it's about, I certainly don't feel under any pressure to have to find a support group, because that isn't something that you have to do. I think it's about finding things that work for you. And I think we also note that support groups tend to be the right thing for people at certainly different points in their pathway.
Also, good
so it might be when you've just diagnosed, you just think, God, no, I've sort of get my head around the fact that I've got to have this and some nuclear medicine scan and some random injection and some really weird thing that they're calling it. And that might just be enough. And the fact that, I've just been diagnosed with cancer, that can be big enough. But because, there is can be quite a long pathway for a lot of patients, you'll tend to find that moment when you think it's the right thing to do. And I think those who do find it useful because it's a sense of community, companionship, speaking to people who just get it. And I think a lot of our patients will say, I can talk to family and friends and none of them have a clue what neuroendocrine is. And it's really hard to explain. And, it's all a bit odd. But when I speak to other people who have gone through the same experience as me, whether that might be a supporter of someone or a carer or the patient themselves, I think that gives a real sense of, oh my God, someone understands what I'm going through. And that can provide so much support. I mean, it's something that we can't fully comprehend, I don't think. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's companionship, it's friendship. Support groups will run in different ways. Sometimes we have our specialist nurse there, Nikki, and she will perhaps provide some further information or symptom management support or medical advice. Sometimes it's just a natter. Sometimes it's a pint in the pub. You can tell I'm from England. Sometimes it's, fish and chips by the sea, whatever it might be. I don't think it matters what context, in what way it comes. But it's back to the same thing. It's about this community. It's about, being with other people who understand what it is that you're going through. And that's the most powerful thing. I mean, just like the quote that said, your experience can be someone else's survival. And that's absolutely true.
Absolutely.
And as I said, it's not for everyone.
Yeah, it's not. No, I love that you led with that, because that little nugget is a metaphor for the overall experience of this disease. From what I understand is that each case is individualized. There's no one set journey for any of us. And so that's why I always hear these expressions like be your own best advocate, and have a multidisciplinary team so that you have all these different opinions that can weigh in rather on the journey and on the prognosis. And so it's everybody's on their own journey, and what fits for some person is not going to fit for the other. So I love that you led with that. Like, hey, support groups are great, but they're not for everybody. And you know what? That's okay. The goal is to find what's best and what works well for you. And that's a metaphor for life, right? I mean, there is no best practice. You can't ignore nuance and case specific things and all that. So I definitely +1 that. And I'm glad that you led with that, because support groups are great, but that is a very, very fair point. Also, love from Manchester.
Hi, Manchester.
From George. Hello, George. Okay, so we have some questions coming in. I want to go ahead and get to that. I think you and I can talk about community and patient advocacy all day long. But okay, so our first question that I see came in from Karen, and Karen says, is a high heart rate, to your knowledge, common in the morning upon waking up and flushing? Mine goes up to 137.
Hi, Karen. I think I've got to be very careful not to kind of answer any specific kind of medical questions here. But, certainly amongst, it depends what type of neuroendocrine tumor you have, whether you have a functional tumor or whether you don't, what your normal symptomology is like. Patients who have carcinoid syndrome can sometimes see raises in heart rate and flushing, of course, and diarrhea and other symptoms. But you would really certainly have to express and share those changes, certainly if they're new to you, with your medical team, and they would need to review that and see whether anything else was going on. But I certainly wouldn't sit on it if that's something that isn't normal for you.
Mm-hmm. And as we already touched on, I just had to call attention to the community in the comments, which we've mentioned. I see it happening right now. Jennifer, who I've already spoken to from North Carolina, replied to Karen and told her her experience. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. You know, Kathy can't specifically speak to that, but this is the community we're talking about. So if you see those opportunities, everyone listening, take them. You know, share your experience. It also doesn't mean that that's the end all be all for that person, but it can be helpful and be at least one step in their survival guide. So
absolutely. And I think, you know, people often, you know, call or will discuss kind of symptoms and issues. And obviously we will know those patients a lot better than we would do in this scenario.
right.
But I think it's so very important to be aware of yourself and aware of your own body and aware of things that are different for you and that aren't right for you. And ensure that your medical teams know about any changes in those symptoms. And we encourage that an awful lot, not to sit on anything. Don't sit on a worry.
Sit on a worry. Oof, yeah.
Feel right. And this is new and this isn't, you know, as it's meant to be, and it's uncomfortable or painful or whatever it might be. Tell your team.
Absolutely. Everybody who's just joining us or who joined us a little bit late, hello and welcome to Luncheon with the Experts with today's guest, Kathy Bouvier from the UK. We are very, very grateful to have her. Send us your messages or your questions, rather. We're talking mostly today about patient advocacy and how a patient can seek out you know, the best journey that they can and have, you know, maintain the best quality of life. This is the 4th episode of a year of these weekly talk shows, Luncheon with the Experts, that we're going to have. This we've done 1 month now, and in honor of that, the last one of the month, I declared that this will be casual Luncheon with the Experts Day, which is why I'm wearing my little beach shirt over here. And if you've been staying tuned to the saga of Rain moving and into his new office, each week there's a little more and more in my background, and I have strategically placed zebras and trophies, which came from CCF videos, just want to say. But yeah, I'm getting there, folks. We're getting there and finding some version of normalcy. So thanks for joining me along for the ride. Okay, so we have a question. Where did that go? Excellent. Tom says, excellent point about the timing and need for support group help. Yeah. Not just having that, not just necessarily doing it at one stage. We have a question from David that says, do you know anyone collecting data from NET patients? I have a background in big data and analytics and would like to get involved with an organization that is focusing on this, e.g., getting patients like myself to opt into sharing everything from tissue samples to response to various treatments. That is an interesting question from David. What do you think of that, Kathy?
Yeah, I think there are many organisations doing that, and there are also many specialist centres that are focused probably on specific research projects collecting that data, but we've been collecting tissue and genetic data, certainly to look or try and improve understanding of why these tumours begin in the first place. Mm-hmm. Been collecting data as part of the 100,000 Genomes project to try and look at kind of genetic mutations within these tumours. You know, in the UK, we've been collecting data and doing work on trying to just ascertain how many people have even got the disease, what type of tumour they've got, how they were diagnosed, those routes to diagnosis, what time it took. So there are many hospitals, as I said, that are doing things individually. There are some international studies that are about collecting data. And there are many patient organisations like ourselves that also collect data, whether it be, obviously we wouldn't collect kind of tissue and blood samples, that would be within a medical environment, but we'd certainly collect quality of life data, data about, you know, incidence, prevalence, that kind of stuff. Would be very much a focus probably for our organisation. But I think what's changed massively in advocacy is that it's not just about support groups anymore. There's so many things that patients can now, and family members can get involved in, huge things. Patients are integral to what we do as an organisation, and they sit as ambassadors and as advisors, and you know, their voice needs to be top and centre of anything that any advocacy organisation does. It can't run without having, you know, huge amount of patient input, that's for sure. But I think there's so many things that people can get involved with. And also, you know, we've seen so many patients and family members put forward fantastic ideas to their health teams, to organizations, for studies, and for, you know, just like David has just suggested. But I think that the best thing to do is to speak to your national organisation, who will have very close contacts with the medical societies. Again, we don't work alone. We work with our UK Neuroendocrine Medical Society, so that we've got you know, a full medical support. And most of the organisations, and especially, you know, CCF as well, will have a big medical team that work with them. So you'll be able to find out what's happening within, you know, research and big data collection within your country or within your nation. So it's worth asking that question depending on where you're from. But yes, it's happening, and more and more.
Awesome. Thank you. Caroline has a question that says, should all NET patients have an endocrinologist on their care team?
All NET patients, in my view, should be looked after by a multidisciplinary team. Now, we know there's huge variance in multidisciplinary teams in terms of who potentially might be the lead for that service. Right. So you might see the lead for that service is a gastroenterologist, there might be a surgeon, there might be an endocrinologist, etc. But there needs to be the full spectrum of specialities that any NET patient might need to see, including specialist nurses, psychotherapy, nuclear medicine, endocrinology, surgery, oncology, gastroenterology. All of those in a good functioning MDT will be available to each and every one of the patients at a point where they might need to see that person. Mm-hmm. So it might be that as a patient you never need to see an endocrinologist, or it might be that an endocrinologist is the lead of your service. So that's kind of who's looking after you, really. That's the team lead. But they should certainly all be there. Each discipline that would be required at some point potentially for a patient should be there as part of that multidisciplinary team, making decisions about your care, and pulled in when it's relevant. Mm-hmm. Which is what would often happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Sense. So, and I see that a couple of people also shared that question. So thank you for that answer. And those that are watching, you know, if Kathy or I, but mostly Kathy, give you some value and answer the question that you ask and help you in any way, a good way to let us know visually is to just click one of those little emojis on the bottom. You can do the thumbs up or the heart, and just let us know that that we did a good job. We love to see that too. But a follow-up question to that, which came from Laurie, coincidentally, says, well, how do we assemble a medical team when there's not a single specialist within a 4-hour drive? Like, how do we approach that?
Yeah, I mean, that is really difficult, and there is disparity, and we know that, and great variation globally. Mm-hmm. We've seen that as part of the work that I do as INCA. I'm currently the INCA president, the International Neuroendocrine Cancer Alliance, but we've just been doing some work, a project called SCAN, which is actually looking at access and medical teams and access to those teams and treatments across the globe, and there is a huge variation. And that's a really difficult thing to answer, except to say that I think that most of the organisations that I know of, certainly all of the member organisations that are part of INCA, want to work towards getting a good geographical spread of neuroendocrine specialist centres across the globe to increase awareness of the disease, so that can happen. And of course, reduce things like that travel time, which I guess can happen in vast countries like sort of America and Canada, where I know that travel time to specialist service can be quite vast. And I'm not sure the answer to the question, except to say that it's absolutely fine to have a shared care protocol. So it might be that your main driving team is 4 hours away, and they will make decisions about your treatment perhaps about when you need to have the next scan or what your follow-up program needs to look like. But if you need anything extra in the interim, you can always have a local hospital who can be coordinating and working with and communicating with that kind of major centre, a bit like kind of a hub and spoke model. And that often works when you've got vast distances or not a great geographical spread of specialised services. So you should, if you have a specialised MDT that generally that is miles away, you need to talk to them about their communication with a local hospital and find someone there that you feel that you could trust to do. It might be a blood test or a CT scan or something, but that's perfectly possible.
Great, thank you. Speaking of Inca, could you tell me? Can we establish a little bit about what's the difference in the type of work that you do with Neuroendocrine Cancer UK and Inca?
Well, I guess my work with Neuroendocrine Cancer UK is kind of my job. Yes, my day-to-day job. Just trying to, drive change and do a lot of work within the UK specific about policies, access to treatments, etc., etc. Inca is a global umbrella organisation that now has 26 members from around the globe, and it's a volunteer organisation that really tries to bring together all of the amazing work and all of the amazing ideas and drive and commitment of all of those 26 member organisations to improve the global picture. So you're ultimately wanting equality across the globe. We're wanting to support those people who have nothing. They don't have a support group. They don't have a specialised centre. But at least they've got somewhere that they can go on a global level that can provide them with some sort of support, as well as obviously doing a lot of global research, a lot of publications, a lot of raising awareness, a lot of training advocates as well. Globally, we've just set up a boot camp to train research advocates across the globe to help them feel empowered to get involved in research studies, that the patient voice can be at the fore of clinical research, etc. So there's some really big projects that are happening, but they're on a global level as opposed to your kind of national level.
Yeah, and it seems like Laurie, who we just spoke with, is exactly the type of person you seek to help through that organization, right? Those who don't have specialists close by. So that was a nice lead in. So I have a message from Kathy that says, I have a support group for rare cancer patients, and I know some patients that don't want to share their story. I try to email these patients privately every 3 months to check in to see how they are doing. And if you're just tuning in, briefly we were talking about the power of sharing our stories, and I'm glad that she brought this up. And this brings me back to what Kathy said earlier about support groups. It's not for everybody, and no path in this journey, they're all individualized, and so nothing is really for everybody. I just wanted to speak to that for a moment, because it's there are challenges with sharing your story. One, you have to be vulnerable and courageous enough to do it. Two, there's often privacy issues with that, depending on your job or just your preference. So it's not easy to do that, and I'm well aware of that. So I appreciate you bringing that point up, and some people are reluctant to do that. I will just say this: storytelling is a two-way street. So there is the storyteller, and then there's the story listener. So those people who aren't comfortable sharing their story still, I think, perhaps would benefit from hearing other stories. So those that are comfortable, I still think I still encourage them to share it, and you can share it in different ways. It doesn't have to be publicly like this. It can be privately in a support group or with someone personally. One of the projects that I'm proudest about with CCF was a 12-part series that we did 2 years ago, patient-centric series. It wasn't about the treatment. It was just about how patients navigate this disease, how it applies to their love, their love and their family relationships, their work, just their psychology of how they emotionally navigate this. These are the ones that the trophies came from, by the way. And so if you haven't seen some of those, they're really impactful. We got a lot of great feedback from people around the world on those. But yeah, it took people comfortable enough to share their story, which obviously this is an emotional journey. So it was not easy. So thank you, Kathy, for mentioning that, because you're 100% right. David says, thanks for addressing my question. Absolutely, David. Is anyone focusing on sharing data across all those organizations? Seems like there are many silos. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point. I can't, I can't really argue with that. I mean, I am a huge believer in collaboration. I talk about it all the time. I think we are stronger when we work together across all of the stakeholders within this community. I really do, as long as it's done in a transparent and honest way. I think there's massive room for collaboration. I think when we do that, we learn so much more. I think when we learn so much more, we evaluate what we're doing right and what we're not doing right, and what needs to change and what needs to develop. And it also gives you the opportunity to listen, which is probably the most important thing you can do in cancer care. I think if you don't listen, then I'd say you're starting on a really wrong foot, because it's that's so important. And I think there's also a sense of, people wanting to drive their own organizations and drive their own hospitals and centers, rightly so, because, there are, the financial issues when you're trying to run organizations and certainly specialized services. And so, it's not always possible to collaborate on every project, but I think it's massively improving. And I think we have a lot of international studies, and it's been the great work of a lot of the medical societies that have come together. And certainly, at INCA, we work with the leads of a number of the medical societies across the board, sharing all of the work that we're doing, and we all get involved in that together. So I agree there are still silos, but I do think it's improving, but we need to continue to say, and to shout out that we need to collaborate always, because I still think it's the best and the only way forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. So Kathy, Tom, who's a top fan of CCF, says, how do you recommend for us to be our own best advocate? Thanks for what you're doing. It helps.
Oh, well, thank you, Tom. I think it depends on what you're like as a person, and what your needs are. I think that's the first thing that has to be discovered. You have to be very honest with yourself about what it is that you need in order to make your pathway easier, and then going out to find that. So that might be gathering the right information, and the information that you can understand and that's clear to you. It's about questioning, and always questioning. If you're unsure of something that has been said to you, say, I'm not sure about that. Or could you please rephrase that? Or could you please explain to me why that is the case? I think also really believing that healthcare shouldn't take place without you at the center of it. People aren't there to just look after you. It's you, it's your body. It's all about you. You are the center of everything, and none of us do anything except for you. So please never forget that and feel like, oh, well, that doctor says that, so I better do it. I don't think that's the right way forward. So I think, you have to educate yourself. You have to question. You have to join the community, I think. You have to listen to what other people are saying. You have to have your own set of questions, and also have your own set of limits, things that you can cope with and things that you can't cope with. Look for support where that's relevant to you. That could be a friend or a family member, or some external kind of psychotherapy kind of support if things like that are needed, so that you can cope with times when they're difficult. But I think there are some clear rules to being a patient expert, and I think probably education and learning is key, because when you feel confident about speaking about the disease that you're dealing with to people who are deemed to be the experts, then I think it's important that you have that education. But I think also just to be very clear, although that sounds like I've got to go and do loads of reading and understand research papers, you are already an expert, because you're the one that's living with that disease. So you know better than anybody else how you're feeling, what your symptoms are, how those symptoms make you feel, whether things are improving or getting worse. You know more than anybody else. And that can't change, because you're the person living with it. So and believe that. Keep it with you.
Oof. It's pretty profound. I love that. I love that. Shout out to the young phenom, Dr. Aman Chauhan, who just joined us. Hello, doctor. He'll be up here. He'll be a guest one day. Yeah, we're getting some heart emojis from that one, Kathy. That was a great response. I've got a message or a question from Brenda, who's also a top fan of CCF, and it's in the same space. I kind of want to stay here for a second, if that's okay. It says, you mentioned not to sit on things that are not normal for us. There are many that have been dismissed by doctors, even with strong advocating. How do we get to specialists when we don't have our own doctors with current and up-to-date evaluation, assessments, and treatments? Insurance most times won't cover when your doctor isn't referring. This is proven with research that many people with NECC are not diagnosed for many decades, even with them advocating for themselves. So kind of where you're going anyway, like they're being met with resistance, and then that's causing problems on the back end with getting insurance to approve things. How does one kind of take control like you're asking them to?
Yeah, it's a challenge, insurance or no insurance. It's, the challenge of late diagnosis within this disease area is embarrassing. And it hasn't improved a great lot. And it's something that we are very conscious of. And a new campaign for 2020 for INCA is to go back to the beginning and say, people are just sitting there with these issues and they can't get referred for investigations, etc. But of course, we want people to be referred in for the right investigation. What we don't want is, was it Brenda?
Yes.
Yeah, for Brenda to have a load of symptoms and then to go and be referred to the wrong person, because that provides even more frustration.
Sure.
Because that person then does the wrong investigation, and then you get sent back to your local practitioner and they say, well, I couldn't find anything there. And that can be really, really difficult. So, and I know many people who have been through that. I think the statistics say, that people have visited between 5 and 11 doctors over a period of 37 months before even being diagnosed. So it's crazy. It is crazy. And I'm not 100% sure what the answer to that is, but I think we as organizations have a responsibility to do a lot more education within healthcare. And I think a lot of the healthcare experts and the net experts have a responsibility to do a lot of education outside of the neuroendocrine cancer community, so that we can raise awareness of the disease. And once we can do that to a level where it doesn't matter who you get referred to, they'll go, oh, neuroendocrine cancer, I don't know anything about that, but you go here, or I know where to send you.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that we've got, because so many cancer types will have a very clear pathway. So you know what's going to happen. You'll have this scan, you'll have that can, and you'll go off to that particular doctor. We don't yet have that globally. We don't have it in the UK either. We have a number of specialist services, 13 of them in a very small country, but we still have a whole group of patients who never get sent there, and are always sent to the wrong person. And that's about getting people to understand what neuroendocrine cancer is, getting it out there in the cancer environment, so that people know across the healthcare spectrum what to do and set up those pathways. But I don't think that is all on the patient. I think the whole community has a responsibility to try and do something about that. And again, it's going to be about education, setting the pathways up, and getting people to know what to do if they suspect neuroendocrine cancer. And we've still got a way to go. So I'm sorry about that, but I am aware it's still an issue, but we've all got to deal with it, and we've all got to move this forward to make it better for everybody.
So speaking of that, I have you had mentioned the problem with late stage diagnosis, right? We have a question. We actually had the creator of the NET test, Dr. Irvin Modlin, on in the first episode of Luncheon with the Experts a few weeks back. We have a question from Caroline that says, do you have a view on the NET test biomarker? Thoughts?
Yeah, I know of Modlin well, and yes, about the NET test, and we're trialing it in a couple of centres here in the UK. It would be amazing if through research and through a clinical trial, we could find that this was going to be a tool that we could use to be able to diagnose and also to support patients through that pathway to understand, time to growth or new metastases or where they're at, and potentially pick up tumours before we even scan patients, which would be amazing. So I think that the possibilities are fantastic, but I guess we've just got to go through the clinical trials in order to be able to work out whether it's ultimately better than what we've got now. We all want it to be the case. I think that's fair to say, because at the moment we don't have, we have a multitude of tests that we have to perform in order to be able to restage a patient or stage them in the first place, and it's never just a one quick blood test. So it would be amazing if that was the case. But I know, a number of countries are using it, and certainly we're trialing it, I think, in a couple of centres in the UK. So I think it's watch this space. Yeah,
so it looks promising.
Yeah, certainly. I think we've just got to do the research, the studies, and get results. And like any other new treatment or new test, I guess.
Right, absolutely. And for those that are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, the NET test, we had on the creator of the NET test in the first episode, and you can still see that video as well as all the other ones from this series and any other series at the videos tab here on the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation Facebook page. This video will be there after we're done broadcasting today, or on YouTube if someone doesn't have Facebook and still wants to access it. But it's basically a blood test, and you could get your blood taken locally and just send it off. So with that issue of late stage diagnosis, this could potentially help that. And as Kathy says, it looks promising, but we still got some more things to figure out. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes, just less than 10 minutes left. So get your questions in while we still have Kathy. Everybody's responding so well to this. Brenda just said, thank you for sharing and making time for so many today. It's truly appreciated. So, I appreciate it too. This has been an amazing conversation. Rosina asks, if I'm receiving treatment in France and I return to live in the UK, would my treatment be continued? And I guess then a follow-up would be, if so, how?
Yeah, I guess, we have had obviously patients that move around. We're a world that does move, and you certainly can, get referred and get your details and get your case, etc., sent across to a UK neuroendocrine specialist team. So that would just come from your French team. I think you alluded to earlier that someone mentioned about this kind of close community, that the medical community is also pretty tight. So most of them all know each other. So certainly if you've got a neuroendocrine specialist service and you're having treatment out of that in France, they will know all the teams in the UK. So it certainly would be possible.
Got it. Thank you. I do have a question from Richard. It may be, a little too case specific, but let's give it a shot. It says, can you speak on monthly 30 milligram sandostatin and its long-term effects? Is that something you're comfortable talking about?
Yeah, long-term effects in all neuroendocrine tumor patient treatments is something that we don't have a huge amount of data on. I guess it's because it's a relatively new cancer, if you like, that's come into the arena. It's certainly something that is being looked at, not just with LAR, which I believe is what you're talking about, sandostatin LAR, but with other treatments as well that people have for a long period of time. We know a few things. We know that we have to scan and check for certain changes that might happen within the gallbladder, for example. We know that it can have some changes to blood sugars, certainly if that's something that you have pre to having the injection. And there are some other side effect profiles that we have seen when we ran a study in the UK, myself, a NET dietitian, Tara Wyand, and a specialist nurse, Philippa Davis, out of the Royal Free Hospital, and we looked at some of the side effects that people were experiencing. having been on this medication for some time. And we did publish that in the British Journal of Nursing, and you can find that on our website. And it does give a little bit of an insight into what people have experienced having used this medication for some time, which you might find that there's a couple of things in there that you can nod to and go, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that. But in terms of medical research, there isn't a huge amount in terms of long-term side effect profiles, but I know it's on people's agenda to start looking at.
Great, thank you. Hope that helps. Kathy, I have a question, and I'm always curious about this. I think you'd be able to speak to it well. When someone gets this diagnosis and they're at the very beginning of this journey, what's the first thing that you suggest that they do? I know that's a big, broad question, but
it's broad. I think it depends on the person. I think the first thing that will happen is one needs to listen to what it is that potentially they need. And often that can just be, am I going to be okay? So sometimes, the suggestion is really just to not suggest anything, and just to listen and talk, and perhaps speak to them again next week, and take it very slowly. Some people will phone up newly diagnosed with some really specific wants and asks, right? Where do I get this information from? How do I get referred into a specialist centre? My GP won't refer me. This doctor's been really annoying. Nobody's taken me seriously. So we try and support that. So that might be that I've physically got to do something like contact the local specialist, or send a letter on behalf of the patient, etc., to say, this is where this patient needs to go, this is that pathway. For other people, it's putting them in contact with other people to chat through, because they just want to speak to someone else who has gone through the same as them. But I think it's an impossible question to answer, if I was being honest, because I truly believe in the individuality, as you say, the uniqueness of each presentation of neuroendocrine cancer and of each individual who experiences it. And I think it would be wrong of me to give a blanket response there, because we do different things depending on kind of what I'm hearing. And that's the honest truth about that. There isn't, I don't give a rule book to say, right, got to do this, that, the other, and then everything will be fine after that. It just, as you talked about nuances, it's you just got to listen and try and understand what somebody needs, especially if they can't tell you. But I think I just try and invite them into a community, try and get them to feel like we care, like we want to help, like we're there with them, so they're not alone. And I think, to me, I keep going back to the isolation feeling. I can't bear the thought of people feeling alone. I think it's the most devastating feeling. So if we can just do that, then that's the starting point, and we'll take it from there. Because we have long-term relationships with people. They become our friends, I don't see many of the people I work with or a part of our community as patients. They're friends of ours. They're friends of NCUK, and a lot of them are friends of mine. And you get very involved, and you become very much part of their life in some cases, which is such a huge privilege.
See, and that's what we call coming full circle. Remember when we talked about today is Friendship Day? Isn't that beautiful? I love how it works out like that. I just got to say, Kathy, so many heart emojis just flooded the Facebook Live as you gave that answer. And literally people are saying, thank you so much for your response. It's helpful to me. So you're on the money there. However, one of our guests, Laurie, was bold enough to say what the first step should be. And she says, first thing, take some time to process it and drink wine. So,
I'm with her.
oh,
I wish I could give that advice, but yeah, definitely, I'm with you.
Before we go,
it's night.
Yeah. Before we go, it's nighttime for you.
Yeah, just done this with a glass of wine, shouldn't I?
Right. Before we go, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. Is there something that you are hopeful about in the near future? What's next coming up for you and your organization? What's something that has you excited at the moment?
Well, I'm quite excited that we're beginning to go back to basics. We're beginning to go back things that just still aren't right. And we're beginning to feel a lot stronger and a lot louder and a lot more powerful to perhaps be able to do something about those things than I might have been 15 years ago when I was kind of a bit new into the game. So I think developing a confidence within a community is really important to be a really good advocate, because you need to be a bit mouthy really in order to be able to sort of get people to listen to you. But I'm just hoping, and I have great hope that we are beginning to understand this disease so much better. We have a huge repository of fantastic experts around the globe. We have a great community. We have still a huge desire for change, and we have such passionate people that want to make a difference, that there can only be hope that we are going to get to the point where everyone knows what neuroendocrine cancer is. Everyone knows what we need to do about it. We know exactly where to send the patients. We've got a huge research profile, which is something that is going to be so important. I want so much more research. And that, we can improve outcomes for patients everywhere, and help people live better and longer, and have a better quality of life than ever before. And that's kind of just what I want, and I think that we can achieve. But we have to do it together, and none of us can do it alone. So we mustn't try to do that, because I think that's when we become unstuck slightly. So
that was beautiful.
What I hope will happen.
Plus one
she
to
said,
that.
that's what I'm fighting for.
Thank you so much. This was an absolute pleasure, and I'm very grateful for your time, and I know that people are too. And to those at home, thanks for joining us as always. We hope that this helped and answered some of your questions. And just a reminder, if we didn't get to your questions, or if you have follow-up questions, please reach out to the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation here on their Facebook page. You can send them a private message or reach them at carcinoid.org. And do know that this video will live here on the Facebook page as well as the YouTube channel. As always, thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. We couldn't do this program without their support. Kathy, thank you very much as well. And everybody out there.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks to the Carcinoid Care Foundation, great friends of ours. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you. So everybody out there, thanks for joining us. Stay healthy, stay safe, and join us next time on Luncheon with the Experts. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye all.